Putting a bitmap into your BitmapFactory.Options in Bitmap field shouldn't take too long, should it? Well, get yourself a nice cup of tea and make yourself comfortable for this one. Welcome to Mobile Application Tutorials. My name's Nigel. In the previous tutorial we showed you how you could use the LruCache for putting your bitmaps into fast memory and having fast access to them. The only issue with that fast memory is it's limited in size, and old bitmaps that aren't used will get discarded from your cache. What we're going to do here is reuse those discarded bitmaps and put them into the BitmapFactory.Options and Bitmap field. What this will allow us to do is this will save us from deallocating and allocating bitmaps every time they get discarded from the cache. And the savings from allocating and deallocating will actually help us improve performance. Let's make a start. So I'm just going to go into my activity here. I'm going to create a object set here to contain my discarded bitmaps. And this is going to be a set which is going to have soft references of my bitmaps. And I'll call this Reusable Bitmaps. So we're going to reuse the bitmaps after they've been discarded. Now, inside the onCreate function, I'm going to initialize my set. Okay, one thing I need to highlight, it's only in Honeycomb versions or later of Android that supports this inBitmap field. So we need to do a check for that. So we need to make sure this is bigger than Honeycomb, or the same as or bigger than the version of Honeycomb. There we can initialize this. Oops, wrong spelling. So we want to synchronize this, and we're going to create a new hash mat of these soft references. Okay, now when we add a bitmap to this set, we want to do it when the bitmap's discarded from the cache. So if we go into when we create the new LruCache, there's a callback that will notify us when a bitmap's been discarded. So we can find that, and it's called entryRemoved. Okay, so every time a bitmap's discarded, it will call this function, and this is where we want to add the bitmap to our set. And again, we'll do our check to see if it supports Honeycomb. And it's a matter of adding that to our set. And and we want to feed the argument of the old value, that's the old bitmap. So this old value here is the bitmap that's been discarded, so we can feed that in here. Okay, we've now reached the stage where we're populating our set with discarded bitmaps. We'll now move on to the implementation of working out whether or not our bitmap can be reused for our in Bitmap Factory and Bitmap field. So I'm going to add a new function down below which is going to calculate the size of bytes for a bitmap. So this is going to be a helper function. And we're going to call it get bytes per pixel. And it's going to take a config, bitmap config. So we're just going to return like a scale fact, multiplication factor of how many bytes live in a particular bitmap config. With a first check on this, and this is a comparison, so I need to make this a comparator. So return, this is a factor of 4 for this particular type of bitmap config. And return 2 here. Just a couple more values to check. And the default will be just to return 1 for this. Okay, now we're going to provide another helper function that's actually going to check whether or not our bitmap is going to be applicable to be reused. And this is just a check, so it's going to return a boolean. We'll call it can use for bitmap. And it's going to take a bitmap. It's going to take 2 arguments. First is going to be bitmap. We call it candidate. Another one's going to be BitmapFactory.Options. Just call it options. So if our requested bitmap is smaller than the bitmap in our set, we can reuse that. We've got the ability to reuse that. So let's do a check for that. This will be KitKat. So first of all, we'll get the width of our requested bitmap size. and we can divide that by the sample size. So we'll do the same thing for the height. Okay, now let's work out the byte count. And we can use the get bytes per pixel and pass it our candidate config. And we'll return the byte count if it is smaller or equal to the candidate allocated byte size, allocated byte count. Okay, this is for KitKat, or else we just have to return the exact same bitmap size for the that's in our set with the one we're requesting. So we have to make sure it's the exact same size. Okay, now I need to create a method where we can get the bitmap from our reusable bitmap set. It's going to return a bitmap. We can call it get bitmap from reusable. So reusable set. And this one's going to take the BitmapFactory.Options. Okay, first thing here, we need to create a bitmap that we're going to return back from. It's called bitmap, and we can set that null at the moment. Now we need to check to see that we've got the reusable bitmaps list set. So check that's not equal to null, and also check that it's not empty. Okay, so we do have a reusable bitmap set there, and it's got a bitmap in it. Okay, the next thing, we need to control access to that reusable bitmap, because we've got a whole bunch of async tasks operating in the background, and they can all call this reusable bitmap set at any particular time. And if we don't know what's being called when and something's interrupting it, it can corrupt our bitmaps and cause nasty problems. So we're going to synchronize this access so only one async task can access this method at any one time. Okay, so we'll feed it in the reusable bitmap. Okay, so we're now protecting the access to our reusable bitmap set. Right, now we can actually create a temporary bitmap used for when we're iterating through the set. Let's call this item. And we need to create an iterator to iterate for each bitmap in our set. And this is going to be a soft reference, and it's going to be bitmap. Just call it iterator. And we're going to use the one provided to us from the reusable set. It's got an iterator there. Okay, now we can actually loop through that iterator, put it in a loop, and iterate, loop, go through each, check to see that there's a bitmap or a number of bitmaps in there, and iterate for each one, go through the loop. Okay, now we can actually assign a bitmap from our recyclable set to our temporary bitmap. Go to the iterator, and we can now get access to that, pull the next and get the bitmap. Now let's do a check to see we actually have a bitmap object there. Make sure that's not equal to null. And make sure we can edit that bitmap, make sure it's mutable. Okay, so if it's passed this condition so far, we can now actually, let me free up this, we can now actually see if we can use this bitmap with the method we created previously. So if can use bitmap and pass in the item plus the options for the request, BitmapFactory.Options. And we need to actually add that in here. So if it's passed all those conditions, we've got proper bitmap, it's mutable, and it actually satisfies our memory allocation bitmap size requirements, we can actually assign it to our bitmap to be returned. Okay, so we can assign that. Now we can actually remove that bitmap from the set. And break out of the loop. And inside this condition, if we do find a bitmap but it's not applicable to what we want, we need to remove it from the set as well. Okay, and at the bottom we need to return our bitmap. Okay, so we've now completed the method of where we check to see we can extract or pull a method from our reusable set. Now it's a matter of calling this method, and we'll call it from inside the bitmap worker task itself. What we're going to do here is create a method where we can set our BitmapFactory.Options to mutable, and then do a call on the previous method to see if we can get the bitmap from the reusable list. Let's create this method. It's going to be a void, and what shall I call it? Add in bitmap options, and it's going to take the bitmap factory options. Okay, first thing that I need to do is make the options immutable, set that to true. Okay, next is I do a call to see if I can get a bitmap from our reusable set. So create a bitmap variable, and its method's actually contained in the activity. So get bitmap from a reusable set, and we're passing the options. So if we actually do get a bitmap object, so in other words it's not equal to null, we can then assign our bitmap inBitmap options to assign the bitmap to that. Okay, so we've now got a bitmap from our recyclable set, and we're putting it into the options in bitmap. So we're telling, when we're allocating a new bitmap, we're saying, hey, we can just reuse an old one. We don't actually have to allocate for a new one, and that will save us time and improve performance. So it's just a matter of calling this, and this will be called from inside the decode bitmap from file. Well, first of all, we need to do a check just to see that our version of Android supports the inBitmap for the options. So again, it's the build version dot. Make sure it's bigger than or equal to Honeycomb. And it's just a matter of calling that method we've just created with the BM options. And that's it. Okay, that's it. We can now, we've now added the implementation to see if we can reuse bitmaps that have been discarded from the cache. Okay, before we can run this, I need to reduce my cache size purely because I think it's too big and it's not going to evict any images. I've only got a certain amount of images. So I want to reduce my cache size so I can evict images and push them onto the recyclable bitmap set. So I go back into my camera activity, scroll up to the top. In my onCreate is where I set the cache size. At the moment I'm dividing it by max memory size of 10. I'm going to divide it by 100. Let's just make a copy of that. And divide it by 100. I'm going to make my cache 10 times smaller than what it currently is. Okay, now let's try running that. And record what's happening in the display. Okay, so I'm going to now start populating my cache with the bitmaps. It does take a bit of time. All the bitmaps have to be allocated, created. Okay, that's now happened. Now let's try scrolling it. Okay, it's a little bit different from last time because we're now evicting it and we're reloading the bitmaps now from the reusable bitmap set. And scrolling back down, and you can see the effects. It's a little bit slower, but I think on the Nexus 4, if you've got faster hardware, you'll probably see a bit different. But as you're scrolling a bit slower, we're now, as you can see, pulling the images from the recyclable bitmap set. Okay, so that was successful. Next step is to debug through the changes we've made just to reinforce what we've learnt. So we're going to add breakpoints to the code we've changed. This will go back into the bitmap worker task and we'll add a breakpoint here. Now go into our activity, we'll scroll on to the bottom, we'll add a breakpoint for each method we created. And go on into the onCreate, and I just want to add a breakpoint from when we start removing bitmaps from our cache, and that will be in here. So once a bitmap's ejected from our cache, we're going to push it up to our recycler bitmap set, reusable bitmap set. Okay, now let's run debug. Okay, straight away we're going to see if we can recycle a reusable bitmap. So we're going into the decode bitmap from file in an async task. Let's step through that and see what happens. So we're going to see if we can get a reusable bitmap. Okay, so I'm going into there, we're allocating a bitmap. Now we're going to check to see if there's a reusable bitmap set available and if that set is empty or not. Now that set's empty because we actually haven't even allocated bitmaps to our cache yet besides evicting them. So nothing's going to happen until we fill up our cache and then bitmaps get evicted. Then we can push them up to the recycler, reusable bitmap set, and then we can start reusing them. So let me just remove the breakpoint here and continue on executing and remove the breakpoint here. We just want to populate our cache full of bitmaps. Carry on executing. Okay, so I need to scroll down to push all the bitmaps onto the cache. Okay, we've got an entry has been removed and we're pushing it onto our reusable bitmap set now. So we're now starting to populate those. So now I can re-add the breakpoint here and go into bitmap worker task and here and carry on executing. Okay, now let's see what happens because we know we've now pushed a bitmap onto the reusable bitmap set. So we're making it immutable so we can make changes to it if necessary. Okay, now let's see what happens. I'd expect to see a bitmap on our reusable set. So we do. Now we're controlling access to that set. Now we're creating an iterator. Now we're going to iterate it through. Now, okay, so we're going to assign a bitmap from the set to our temporary bitmap variable. Okay, now we're doing a check onto it to see that we do have a bitmap there and it's mutable. It is. Okay, so now we're going to check the sizing of it to see if the bitmap size that we're requesting is large enough. Okay, so can we use it for the bitmap? Okay, so I'm using KitKat version here, so I can use smaller size bitmaps if necessary. So we're just getting the height, the width, and we're going to, and we've now gone into the get bytes per pixel here. And so this is going to give me, it's telling me how many bytes are for each pixel, quite self-explanatory. And so basically my config is RGB 8888, so it's returning a multiplication of 4, carry on. So I'm now going to get my byte count value. So my byte count is this size, and we're going to see if my byte count is smaller or equal to the actual size of the requested bitmap that we want. So let's jump out of that. And it is. So basically the reusable bitmap satisfies our byte sizes requirement. And so we are now allocating the bitmap from our reusable set to the bitmap to be returned back. Now we can remove that from the reusable set and return that bitmap. Okay, so we've now got the bitmap here. Do a check to make sure it's not null. We're now assigning that bitmap to the bitmap here, to the options in bitmap field. So in effect, we're reusing a bitmap. This is saving us from allocating and even deallocating old bitmaps. And if you don't have to allocate or deallocate, you're going to be saving time. It's going to improve performance. And keep on running that. And so we're going to be creating a new bitmap from the file by reusing one of the bitmaps we've saved in our set. Okay, and carry on running that. And let me remove these breakpoints now. We are running in debug mode here, but I can still comfortably scroll through these images. Okay, so that completes the end of this tutorial. What we learned here is that this sort of implementation, even though it's quite a bit of coding, needs to sort of go hand in hand of when you're using a cache for your bitmap. Because once your cache gets full, it's going to start evicting bitmaps, and you don't want to have to keep reallocating and deallocating bitmaps. So you use a method like that to save the allocation and deallocation of bitmaps. Therefore, it will improve the performance for something like an image gallery. Anyway, that's it for this tutorial. If you like my tutorials, subscribe. That's all for this one. Bye for now. We need to get the context, and we can get that from the image view itself. So I've got to call the holder.